Okay, so here are some possible responses, and none of these are right or better than any others. But my response, okay, would always start with this. My response to this question, if I was answering it, would always start with direct answer to the question. So the question is, how did it happen? Dot dot dot. How did it happen that governments came to own and run most high schools while leaving food production to private enterprise? My answer is governments came to own and run most high schools while leaving food to production to private enterprise because dot 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 or primarily because or primarily due to, and then I would give one of these reasons or a combination of them. So these are the ones we talked about. We talked about political factors, social factors, economic factors, religious factors, the historical development, which is a factor in its own right, because it might just be to do with certain developments that are a little bit random. There's not necessarily very good reasons for them, because that's what history does, is, whether a certain side lose a battle because of the weather might lead to the outcome of the war, and then who's running that country for the next 100 years, 200 years might just hinge upon what the weather was like on the day of a certain battle. So that wouldn't be to do with political, social, economic, religious. It would be more almost not random necessarily, but just due to events, just due to historical events. So that's a factor in itself. You might say, well, this happened, this division between governments and private enterprise happened just because of the development of food production or the development of schools and education, okay? Or you can say both. So you might say government, blah, 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 because of political factors and social factors. And then my counter argument might be, some have argued that economic factors are really important. Specifically, they argue human capital is a main reason. That would be a counter argument. And then I would overcome the counter argument by maybe saying, although that is a good argument and governments do tend to see education as an investment in the workers and the people in the country, actually that's not the main reason that education started. It was more for social factors or political factors or whatever your argument is. Okay. And then let's go into detail in these a bit more. So these are all things that you've seen before, so I'll go through them quite quickly. And as I say, you've got the slides, so you can read them more if you want, but these are all our answers we've seen. So let's say I'm arguing this happened due to political factors. One is the nation and their rulers, like Frederick II and other Prussian rulers. They wanted a strong military and they wanted a workforce. They wanted to be the strongest power, and they thought that educated people would help them be the strongest nation. There's the middle class factor, that if the middle class want something, then governments tend to take that seriously, partly because there's a lot of people there, partly because they have money, they help fund political parties, they often control the media and things like that. And yeah, so a potential argument would be that the middle class don't really need government food, but lots of people do need private education because public education, because education is generally more expensive, perhaps. Or you can do the political moral argument that some people just thought for moral and political reasons that there are human rights to education, for instance. We talked similar to political as the social thing, that some people thought it would prevent divisions in society. Economics, we mentioned human capital already. And then the other one is the knowledge argument. So Friedrich Hayek's idea that we looked at, that it's really difficult for a state to know what should be grown in each field, in each farm. And if they try and decide that, then they'll get it wrong. Whereas instead, it's much better that individuals who do know that get on with that. And for those really interested in economics, you could talk about the price system. And then we also talked about the fact that religion is clearly important here, at least a bit, because so many of the early schools around the world were religious schools. They were about teaching people religious texts, and teaching people to continue teaching others in the future certain religious values. And with food, we do see food being extremely important in some religions, but probably less so than education. And then we saw that Protestantism is an example of an important religion in the West, and around the world, indeed, in the East as well, and the global South, where there was a lot of emphasis put on teaching people to read so that they can understand religious texts themselves.